everyone. Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. Welcome. Today is May 13th. It's Wednesday, and this is episode 33 of TechStrong TV. As usual, a couple of quick announcements. June 4th, TechStrong Con. TechStrongCon.com is the registration. A couple of new speaker announcements there. I think I mentioned Emmett Keefe, Chenzi Wang, Rich Mogul. Just a lot of people lining up here. There's got to be 30 plus speakers now, 2 different auditoriums. We'll have a main stage, secondary stage. There's about 10 or 12, maybe more sponsors. Sponsorships are available, actually. If you go to TechStrongCon.com, you can get more information. I hope you're following along. I don't know whether it be on TV via the Amazon, Roku, or Apple TV channels, or on mobile via by the way, that's on the DevOps.com app, DevOps.com app on iOS or Android, or maybe via the web on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, DevOps TV channel, LinkedIn Live, or on Twitter, as well as DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, TechStrong.tv, DigitalAnarchist.com, which, by the way, has a new interface coming up. Would love to get your feedback on it. So check that out at digitalanarchist.com. Anyway, lots of ways to watch, but if you're seeing this, you figured out one of them anyway. And thanks for joining us. We've got a good show lined up. Give you a quick highlights. We've got Jeff Williams, co-founder of Contrast Security, talking a little bit about the history of AppSec. We have Ankush Chiata from JFrog, going to tell us what's new with the JFrog Go Center, which was just launched, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, and is really catching on as the place, as the repo for Go artifacts and code. Then we have Scott Price, founder of Align. Align is a compliance specialist, cybersecurity, and he's going to talk to us about, this whole COVID thing's going on, but it's not an excuse not to be compliant with GDPR, CCA, and some of the other regulations that we all have to adhere to. Then we're going to go into our archives. I'm going to pull one back from our Kubernetes virtual summit last summer. And it features Tim Hockin of Google. Tim, of course, was one of the members of the original team, founding team, developed Kubernetes. Tim's a real visionary as well, though, and Tim is going to give us his take on the future of Kubernetes, and we'll see, how it's played out, though Tim, I think, was taking a longer-term view even back then. I'll then be doing some news, and then after that, time to limber up with Jeremy Jones, working from home fitness. Then we'll turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, who has a good interview with Tony Howlett. Then we have Mitch Ashley at the Analyst Corner today. We have both a commentary and video. And that'll wrap it up for today, Wednesday, May 13th. So we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be right back with our first guest.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. Featuring John Bacagallupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at TechStrongCon.com.
Okay, back in the studio. Our first guest, as I mentioned, is Jeff Williams, CTO, co-founder of Contrast Security. But Jeff has also just been a driving force and a real player in the AppSec space virtually since there was an AppSec space. Had a little trouble there. Jeff's going to give us a little historical context around application security and where we are now with it. So let's go to our interview with Jeff Williams, CTO, co-founder of Contrast Security.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is a friend of mine who really has a really distinguished career in security. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but I'm gonna embarrass him a little bit today and make him talk about it. It's Jeff Williams. He's the co-founder, CTO of Contrast Security, right, Jeff? And let me welcome on Jeff Williams. Hey, Jeff, how are you doing?
Thanks, Alan. I'm doing well. Great to be here.
Thank you. It's actually great to have you on here. So, Jeff, look, you and I have done a half a dozen interviews, podcasts, and everything, and we always talk about what's new at Contrast Security or what's new in the world of security. And I wanted to talk a little bit in this session about Jeff Williams and how your own personal security journey, right through the security community, really, there'd be no contrast without Jeff having done what he's done in the security world, right? Because we're all kind of the sum of our parts, and this is the present stop on the journey. But there was a path of that journey that got us today. You weren't here from today, right?
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit, and I want to look at it through, if you don't mind, I want to look at it through the lens of like the whole open source and web app security movement, right? And when I say open source, I mean open source security or securing open source, not necessarily like was Nessus 2.7 open source and 2.71 wasn't, that kind of thing. So you fair? You open to doing that? Not going to embarrass you? Okay. So go ahead, tell us the Jeff Williams story.
Well, it's funny. I feel like the universe has always been trying to tell me to do contrast for like 25 years. And I eventually got around to doing it.
Yeah.
But, when I was in high school, I used to modify games, break copy protection, things like that. And it was really instrumentation. But I didn't recognize. Then later, I got into pen testing. I did some work on the early versions of Java and built, if you remember, that was when like Java ran in the browser. And
I do remember with the little black and white Java guy, right? And then he had a girlfriend or something.
Sun had tried to create this sandbox for Java to run in inside the browser to make mobile code safer, which was a cool idea. It didn't really make it, but it was interesting. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to extend the policy that it could enforce in the browser. So I instrumented Java within the browser, and I did that for a project for the NSA, but it just stopped there. Then later on, finally, I was doing a talk at Black Hat about what a malicious developer could do inside a big company. And I looked at all the different things, that they could do. They could write a backdoor, they could write a malicious test case, they could compromise an open source library that the company was bringing in. Like if someone Trojaned Log4j, for instance, they could be running as root in every data center in the country after a certain amount of time. As soon as people updated, if they could successfully do that. So it's really an incredibly large attack surface that I can't believe that they're ignoring. So, that got me interested in open source. And I also looked at, what a malicious developer could do using instrumentation. And that kind of got me into the Java Instrumentation API, which headed me towards Contrast. And now we're actually using that instrumentation technique that originally I thought of, like, what could a bad guy do? I eventually got to like, what could a good person do with instrumentation, and realized that it's just such a powerful way of getting inside an application and analyzing the security by directly watching the code run. And that became Contrast.
Unbelievable, right? And across this journey, Jeff, takes place against the backdrop of a maturing, evolving security industry, right? So,
Sort of.
we want to think that anyway, right? Come on. There's enough bad stuff in the world going on right now. Try not to blow up my bubble. We're evolving. We're getting there.
Sure.
Evolving. So, you mentioned like I remember those days with Java, right? I remember updating my friggin' Java machine every other day, it seemed like. But another major thing though was the shift from like network security, which is kind of where I came from, right? The moat and castle perimeter security world, and then endpoints, to application security, right? Application security, I guess, first hit my radar. I'm going to guess it had to be around 2006, and I was probably late to the party. Is that fair? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really started getting into it in the late 90s and started my consulting company in 2002. OWASP got formed about that time.
Yep. So maybe it was early, you're right. Because I absolutely remember OWASP being formed.
Yeah.
And so, and that's had a profound effect on the industry, right? We went from everything being about that moat and castle perimeter, right? And then cloud really came on the scene, let's say around 2005 maybe, right? We started seeing stuff move to the cloud. So the migration, cloud migration and stuff really accelerated the move away from just perimeter security to AppSec being kind of the center of the security universe for.
That's the way I think of it. So to me, the network is kind of far away from the data, right? Like you got, on top of that, you've got operating systems and hosts and containers and then some frameworks and libraries, and finally custom code is what's actually touching the data and moving it around. And like, I feel like security is best done close to the data. Like the closer you get, the more accurate you can be. And so, to do application security at the network layer today is crazy to me. You look at a WAF, like if a WAF sees a serialized object going back and forth on the wire, what can it really do?
Yeah.
It can't look inside there.
You're not going to get an argument out of me on that, Jeff. But I think another major development that we've seen, with AppSec was almost, I don't know if you'd call it a specialty within AppSec, but this idea of open source security, securing open source components, and code snippets, whatever you want to call them, in the applications we're running, right? And is it a subspecialty? Is it its own world at this point? What do you think, Jeff?
It's an interesting question. I think it's really part of the same thing. I think most teams that I work with, they deal with both open source and custom code vulnerabilities. But it is interesting how it grew. Like when I started, applications would have a handful of libraries, 5 to 10 libraries that they'd include, and they were all like downloaded by the developers and bundled into the application, and that was it. But today it's super different. Now developer specifies one high-level library, and it downloads automatically as part of their build, and then that library pulls in dependencies, and they have dependencies, and so you end up with applications that we see regularly, hundreds of libraries as part of a typical application. And in some languages, even more, like in Node environment, NPM has just got lots of tiny little libraries that all come together to build a final application. So it's quite different.
Interesting. So at a lot of the when we used to go to conferences, but at a lot of the conferences that we used to go to, a number that would be bandied about pretty regularly was that like 80% of the code in a lot of the applications that we run today are actually open source. And people would say, oh my God, 80%, that sounds crazy. It can't be that high, blah, blah. But when you start taking into the account that many of these applications actually have codes or calls to libraries, external or internal, hosted on or off, you start seeing, and as you say, there's hundreds of libraries that may have dependencies involved here, or tens of libraries.
It's a little misleading. So it is true if you just looked at the raw number of lines of code that roughly 80% is libraries. But the problem is most of that library code never gets called. So, if a library has 10 functions and it pulls in 10 transitive dependencies to fulfill those functions, and then the application only uses one of those, that means 9 of those 10 transitive dependencies never get used. So it's a little contrived example, but really what we've found is that the vast majority, 90% of the libraries that get pulled into an application never get invoked. So that's actually really important from a security perspective, because if you think of it like an iceberg where the custom code is the part that pokes out of the water, then there's a little bit below the water that actually gets called. And then there's a ton below the water that never gets invoked. The security concern is really on the stuff that gets called. And so it's actually really important to be able to tell the difference between which libraries are actually getting invoked and which ones aren't.
So let me just make it clear, because not everyone in our audience here is a security person, Jeff, right? We've got cloud native, DevOps, cyber, digital transformation folks. If the library was never gets invoked, it's a non-factor from a security point of view. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right.
And how do we tell what got invoked or not invoked?
Well, so the first generation of open source security tools or third-party security tools, all they do is they just check all the libraries. They say, what do you got and which ones have known vulnerabilities, and that's it, they're done. There are 2 approaches to actually telling which ones get called. One is to try to figure it out by looking at the source code of the application and trying to statically crawl all the libraries and calculate which libraries get invoked. And that's super error prone because it's just really, it's complicated. The better way to do it is to actually watch the application run at runtime and measure what actually gets called. Then you have a really good understanding of really what that application is using and what it's not.
I agree. And, we saw this. Look, even on the perimeter side, I remember when FireEye first came out, right? They're selling these big $100,000 boxes. What they were actually doing is when they would flag something as potentially suspicious, malicious, they'd actually run it in the sandbox, right?
That's right.
To see what it did do, right? What did it call? What did it do? It's a similar kind of philosophy here, where we watch it at runtime to see what calls were made and what we're doing there. Exactly. If you don't mind, I want to focus in on contrast a little bit. So how do you guys play? What's your prescription for this problem?
So what we do is we use instrumentation to measure the security of applications while they're running. So you can do this in development, and you add our agent to the application. It's an application layer agent, not an operating system level agent. It's just like a profiler like New Relic or App Dynamics, but for security. Mm-hmm. And we watch the application run, we directly measure it, and we identify vulnerabilities using that. We also analyze all the libraries to identify vulnerabilities in libraries. And we find not only the known vulnerabilities in the libraries, but also any unknown vulnerabilities that are there as well, based on how the application actually uses the library. Then we do one other thing in production. We also use that same instrumentation capability to prevent vulnerabilities from being exploited in production. So, if you deploy an application that has an unsafe deserialization flaw in it, Contrast can prevent that from being exploited in production. It's much different than trying to block it on the perimeter. Because we're inside the app, we can actually see what's going on, and we can say, oh, we know that's malicious, we're going to stop it.
Makes
so we do the
perfect
three
sense.
things. And we do it for Java, .NET, Node.js, Ruby, and Python. And I feel like I'm missing one. Node.js, Ruby, Python. Yeah, that's
Script?
.NET Core.
Okay.
Yeah,
what
so we
percentage
a
would
lot of
you
language.
say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Those 3 or 4, what percentage coverage is that, do you think, I mean, one of the problems we have today in the world too is every graduate student in computer science writes their own language, and there might be 3 applications in the whole world that run that language for 3 years, and then it's extinct, right? So,
in a typical large enterprise, we see it. The languages that we support are like 85 to 90% of the interesting applications, the ones that are exposed and have sensitive data in them. People write those in those kinds of languages. We don't see a lot of people betting their enterprise on PHP these days.
No.
So
PHP has really gone away. Though Python is, I still see a lot, especially on the ops side of the house, right?
Oh yeah, lots of Python, particularly in like the data science space. But there's a lot of Python. But there's a lot more. It's really it's like 80% Java and .NET.
Yeah.
And like Node, Ruby, Python are like a little bit. Some organizations have more Node, but it's we'll see it changes because technology changes. So like serverless might change this this breakdown a little bit.
It'll be interesting. What about edge stuff, Jeff? You seeing much of that, or how's that play into it? Edge computing.
So we don't do a lot. Like we're focused really on the custom code that you're building for your enterprise. Like it's not that you don't need security of hosts and containers and all that. It's just we focus on the application layer.
Well, I think like what you said too is you want to get as close to the data as possible.
Yeah.
Here's another question, and I'm sorry if this comes out of the blue at you, but it just came into my head. So I've interviewed a few chief data officers recently, a couple of other companies who are playing in what they call data ops now.
Yeah.
Right? And not from a security necessarily point of view, Jeff, more from like DevOps and cloud native and all that. But in my mind anyway, you can't really have a good data ops story without having a security story attached to it, right? Because, it just... I hope we don't make that mistake, right? Of not understanding that security needs to be in here. Are you seeing a lot of this, data ops and stuff like this popping up?
What I see, unfortunately, is that security is relatively siloed still in most organizations. So, you're suggesting security should work much more closely with the data side of things. I think most people would agree security ought to work more closely with development side of things, probably the operations side of things. But the fact is, in most organizations, security is pretty isolated. They do their thing. They tap into the process somewhere. Like maybe they'll get a copy of the code and run a static analysis and generate a PDF report and throw it over the fence. But they're not really part of the process. And that's really what the problem is that it's not part of everyday work. It's like this side thing that happens to achieve compliance, and it's not working. It hasn't worked in 30 years. It's probably not going to start working now.
Okay. I wanted to end it on a high note, Jeff. What else do you got for us? Maybe give us some hope. What do you see happening that's happening?
Here's my optimistic view, because I'm an optimist. I've tried everything, so I know what doesn't work. That makes me optimistic.
That's one way of getting there. Yeah.
But I've seen instrumentation change industries. Like if you look at the medical industry, instrumentation is changing everything. Your watch and your phone probably know you're sick before you do, and they're going to be the next layer of defense against the next epidemic. I
hope so.
I have a basketball. It's an instrumented basketball. It's called the 9450, and I've been playing basketball my whole life. But I played with this thing for like 30 minutes, and it gave me a readout on my phone that says all these things about my dribble speed and misses and makes, and it told me I'm shooting the ball too flat. And I was like, okay, I made an adjustment, and it improved my shooting dramatically. And it's that, if you think about the effect there, imagine if, all the kids in the world probably can't afford coaches, but imagine we get them an instrumented basketball, and they can teach themselves. And that's really the magic of instrumentation, is it democratizes industries where experts have dominated. We don't need as many doctors if everybody's monitoring themselves. We don't need as many basketball coaches if everybody's got an instrument in basketball. And we don't need as many security folks, or maybe we can reposition them to be focused on more strategic things like threat modeling and security architecture and threat intelligence, things that nobody ever gets to because they're busy dealing with this, avalanche of vulnerabilities. If we can reposition ourselves to use software development as the big machinery to do the heavy lifting on security, that'll allow us to be much more effective. And so that's why I'm optimistic, because I think instrumentation can unleash that and democratize security finally.
That's where I wanted to be, Jeff. All right. Hey, we're about out of time here. I want to thank you for joining us as usual. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Stay well, stay healthy, enjoy the family while you have the time, right? Those boys will be back out of the nest again soon, hopefully. And, we only get them for a short time.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Jeff Williams, CTO, co-founder, Contrast Security here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
I was at a DevOps World, or maybe it was a KubeCon event about a year and a half ago, and the folks at JFrog had the JFrog and Friends special experience, and I, of course, was invited, my friends at JFrog. And while we were there, they announced the Go Center, which was going to be a repo based on Artifactory, but strictly for Go artifacts and for Go code. And, I've been following it since then. It continues to grow. But in this segment, we're going to speak with Ankush Chiata of JFrog. And Ankush is going to give us an update on what's new at Go Center. It really is thriving. And it's becoming, it's integrated with X-Ray and the rest of the JFrog Enterprise platform. So Ankush is going to give us an update on that. Let's go to that interview right now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, and this is another segment on TechStrong TV. Happy to be joined in this segment by my friend Ankush Chiata from JFrog. Ankush, welcome to TechStrong TV, man. How are you?
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having me here. I'm doing good. How about you?
Fantastic. It's our pleasure to have you here. Always happy to have a frog. Come on, we haven't had, actually the last frog we had on was Ido Green, but that was 2-3 weeks ago. So we haven't had a frog for a while, so it's all good. Ankush, where in the world are you coming to us from today?
From Sunnyvale, California.
Yeah, in the swamp. Well, the swamp out there is closed, obviously, like everyone else's office, but you're out in California. Good. So Ankush, the reason we're going to talk today is a little bit about JFrog's Go Center.
Sure.
Right. And we were talking off camera, and I said I first found out about JFrog's plans around starting a Go Center. I'm going to say it was at a KubeCon in perhaps Seattle.
Yep.
And they took Frogs and Friends, I think was the name of the thing. They took us, it wasn't Seattle, excuse me. Seattle, we went to a James Beard thing, and they were cutting up salmon or something.
Uh-huh.
It was another KubeCon or another event. Maybe it was a CloudBees event or something, like DevOps World. But they took us to sort of an airplane museum. for vintage airplanes. But at that event, it was, I think Baruch made an announcement that they were, or was it Yov? Someone made an announcement about Go Center.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I guess it was what, about a year ago now, a year and a half?
Yeah, more than a year and a half ago, sometime in I believe December 2018 was when we demoed to the world.
Yeah.
And in January, like within a month, we made it GA, generally available, for all the Golang community to use Go Center for free. Like we don't charge for it. It's a public Go proxy that is available for the Golang community for free, right? And why we did it is because Golang ecosystem was new. The package management Go modules was just standardized, right? And there was a lack of like a public proxy. That's the right term in the Golang community. So there was no central Golang modules repository. We saw the opportunity to stabilize and strengthen the Golang ecosystem, so we jumped on it.
You know, it's funny, most people don't know this, but one of my partners in media ops is a fellow named Martin Logan. And Martin was the person who originally registered DevOps.com. And when I started media ops, you know, that was Martin's contribution basically. But Martin's much more well known as he ran a couple of Golang camps, 2012 and 11, and actually wrote a book on Golang. So Golang's a language that's been around now for a while. I think most of our DevOps folks have probably heard of it. Maybe some of our cloud transformation or digital transformation, some of our cyber folks, you know, maybe some of the not technical folks aren't familiar. So why don't we start on, can you give them a little background on Golang?
Sure.
So they understand what we're talking.
Yeah, sure. So Golang it's a relatively young language, like if we compare it against C, C++, Java, right? Usually it's kind of coined as a cloud native language. If like Kubernetes is written in Go, Helm, the package manager of Kubernetes is written in Go, Docker is written in Go, right? And one of the big advantages of Golang is that it's easy, right? So like, let's say if I want to start up like a server, right? I have to write a lot of code like in Java just to have the server up and running, right? In Golang, it's a single line, right? So it's that simple, right? And when we talk about containers, right? So with containers, what we are saying is, okay, there's an application code bundled with an operating system, right? And in case of Java, right? So the size of the Docker image is going to be huge, right? With Golang, that's not the case, right? Because it's tiny, right? And it doesn't carry a lot of baggage. Like I don't need to have, like, let's say a JRE install. So there is less baggage. And from containerization perspective, like the size of containerized app, let's say if it's written in Golang, it's very small, right? And we have seen the evolution. So those are the advantages, right? And in Golang community, the package management, which is like a fundamental unit to speed things up, to speed the software delivery pace, because, hey, if I can reuse someone else's work, again, assuming it's permissive, right? It increases the pace of my delivery, right? So in the package management space and in Golang, we saw a lot of movements, right? So there were a lot of package managers. There was Go Dep. There were others. I think there were 6 or 7, right? Before Go modules was standardized, right? So it has gone through a lot of evolution, right? But again, like this is coming a language of choice when we're talking about like cloud native companies being cloud native, they're adopting Golang more aggressively, right? And what we are doing is we are trying to make sure that the ecosystem is strong, right? And it's secure, right? And we made a lot of releases recently to allow that, right? So starting with Go Center, it's a central repository for Go modules. What it does is let's say if I try to download a Go module, say today, right, versus a month from now, we make sure that an end user or Golang developer, they're downloading the same file, right? And that's how we are helping the Golang ecosystem.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, of course, the idea of having a repository for a particular not artifact, because obviously that's what JFrog's best known for, is Artifactory, right? But really, if we look at Artifactory, it's a similar model. Here, instead of artifacts, we're talking about Golang objects or Golang code modules or whatever you want to call them. And so this is not something that is so far afield for JFrog. You would say, well, where's their expertise? They're taking the expertise you have from Artifactory.
Yes.
And porting it, if you will, to Golang. And give us an idea. So it opened GA about a little over a year ago, a year and 4 months ago, something like that, year and 3 months, whatever.
Yeah.
How big is that repository at this point? Are you allowed? It's open, I assume, so people would know.
Yeah, I mean it's huge. It's terabytes. Yesterday morning we had 700,000 plus Go module versions. So it's growing at an amazing pace. Again, behind the scenes, we are using Artifactory, using the knowledge that we built over the number of years, because we have been in the package management space for quite some time. Like Artifactory supports 27 plus, and we are again applying the same learnings here. So that repository is huge, right? And it's, again, like as I mentioned, 700,000 plus Go module versions available. But we never stopped there, right? We said, hey, like it's not only our responsibility to improve to strengthen the ecosystem, but even to make it more secure as well, right? So which is where other products as part of platforms are coming in, like JFrog X-Ray, right? JFrog X-Ray is what it does is it identifies, it's very complicated things done behind the scenes, right? So we have like a data science team which analyzes security issues, right? Then we have X-Ray which identifies, it uses a similar technique that we are using in the COVID-19 era called tracing, right? So we identify components, run some tests, check if they are vulnerable, then check who these components got in touch with or the consumers. So, and we go far to figure out the impact, right? And we bring in all the information to the end users in GoCenter, JFrog X-Ray, and even in a lot of ID plugins that we released recently.
Yep, absolutely. So you mentioned X-Ray, which is a security product. It works on Artifactory, it works on the Golang modules as well. But recently, you guys have improved the security around the Golang repo. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure. Yep. So the idea is, like, I was looking at NVD dashboard numbers yesterday, right? So there are 200 plus, I think 230 plus new CVs analyzed this week overall, like not for Golang, but overall, right? And for this year itself, that number has crossed 7,300. So there are 7,300 new CVs were analyzed by NVD this year, right? And Alan, these numbers, like this number is greater than the entire annual 2015 and 2016 numbers, right? Yep. So we are saying DevOps, it's increasing the pace of software deliveries, but it is also exponentially increasing the number of security issues as well, right? So what we are trying to do with JFrog X-Ray and with the ID plugin that we launched is we are trying to contain the impact of these security issues which are coming in, right? And by making the information more visible and actionable, right? So 2 weeks back, we launched a Visual Studio Code extension, right? And we are using a shift left approach so that, like, developers, we are giving them a lot of data so that they can make the right choices and not use vulnerable versions, right? So that is something that we announced 2 weeks back, and we are showing all the security information to the developers in a very less intrusive way. Like we are trying to enrich the tools they are already using. We are not asking them to install a new tool on a laptop, and hey, by the way, you need to get legal approvals, security approvals, none of that stuff, right? Our focus is to enrich the tools that the developers are already using, right? They can go install this IDE plugin. It's available for free, right? And it's giving a lot of data, and not only security data, but also like popularity data, right? Statistics, how many downloads, how many stars that module has, right? Or who's using this module. Like, for example, let's say Facebook is using a logging framework, right? Maybe I should use it if it has no security issues and it's being used by a bigger company. Hey, like I'll use it. So it also makes a lot of decision making easier for the developers.
Absolutely. Ankush, I'm reminded of something I was talking about with Edo. So during COVID-19, JFrog is making the entire platform available to COVID-19 researchers,
Yes.
people working on COVID. Does that include the Go Center and premium versions and what have you? I mean, Go Center at base is free and open anyway.
Yes.
But some of the X-ray integration and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Go Center is free. The IDE integration that we announced, it's free as well, right? And if you want to do more, like we have a paid tier as well, like with Artifactory, X-ray, and the platform. That there is a paid tier, and which like you add more components, you get more benefits, right? And if there are companies that are doing COVID-19 research, the entire platform, like the end-to-end platform from Artifactory, being the single source of truth for binaries, X-ray, single source of truth for a lot of metadata, right? Then distribution, mission control, pipelines, which is a new addition to the suite, right? So all of these tools, they are free for companies who are doing the COVID-19 research.
Fantastic. I know it's hard right now with JFrog's a company that I know, though there's a lot of people distributed around the world. Sunnyvale, you guys have a whole at the swamp there. There's one in Israel. How is this whole COVID-19 affecting continued development of features, let's say on Go Center or some of the other JFrog products?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Like, of course, like we make sure that my team and all the teams, in fact, they are safe, right? We like process-wise, we like ask the team members to like block time an hour during the weekdays so that they can do groceries to avoid the lengthy lines over the weekend, right? But on the positive side, in the last leap or sprint, like I had a retro, right? And I asked the team members, okay, what were the positives in these 3 weeks of the COVID-19, right? The interesting point that they raised is, hey, like our documentation improved, right? Because we are missing those whiteboard conversations, and the devs, they are making sure that everything is documented, and so that it's very easy to share and communicate with different team members, right? So that is something very positive. Is something like, okay, like at the pace that we are delivering, and again, like our pace is not impacted. Go Center, we have one release every week, right? Last year, in 11 months of operation, there were 74 releases, 0 downtime upgrades that my team is responsible for. That's the frequency of releases we are talking about, right? And there is no impact even with the COVID-19, right? But the added benefit that we got is the documentation, right? That is improving, which is good. And that is something that we do want to carry forward once we are in the post-COVID-19 era.
Absolutely. Sounds good. I apologize. Ankush, I didn't do a good job of introducing you. Let our audience know, what's your role at JFrog?
Sure. Yep. So I manage a community engineering team at JFrog, right? And before JFrog, like I've been in release engineering, release management, CI/CD, DevOps space for the past 15 years, right? And what my team does at JFrog is we identify specific problems being faced by different communities, and we go ahead and solve those problems. And whatever we do, it's available for free to the community, right? So we are responsible for identifying problems, implementing the solutions to the problems, writing tests, deploying our services on Kubernetes, upgrading our services, monitoring, supporting, right? So what we do is we try to identify the pain in the community, right? And with our expertise, we try our best to solve, right? And a couple of examples. So Go Center is one. It's a central repository available for free. to the Golang community. Similarly, we have Conan Center, which is a central repository for C++ packages. Again, it's available for free to all the C++ developers across the globe, right? So those are the projects that I'm usually involved in, is to find community pain and then go ahead and solve that pain.
Perfect. People who want to get more information about GoCenter, where do they go?
GoCenter.io.
Easy enough.
Yep, easy enough. Yep.
All right. Hey, Ankush, I appreciate you coming on and joining us. We're over our time limit, but keep up the great work, man. JFrog's doing great things here with this, and for all of the Go enthusiasts and professionals in the world, this is a real kind of godsend for them, right? It makes a big difference.
Yes.
Okay, my friend Ankush Chadha, one of the frogs from JFrog here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Our next segment features Scott Price. Scott's the CEO of a company called Align. And Align is a compliance specialist, right? They help large organizations and some smaller enterprises with things like GDPR, CCA, and other regulatory and compliance issues. And just because we're all working from home and remote doesn't mean we get a pass on our compliance. And Scott and the Align folks are dealing with this every day. He's going to give us an update on how things are going with that. So here's our interview with Scott Price of Align.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this segment on TechStrong TV. My guest today is Scott Price, CEO of Align. Scott, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks so much for having me, Alan.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. It's nice to have a Florida neighbor on the show, but of course, in these days, whether you're across the street or across the country, it makes no difference because we're just on Zoom anyway. But anyway, thanks for joining us, Scott. We haven't introduced Align to our media ops, security boulevard, DevOps, container, cloud native audience before. So why don't we, I think that's a good place to start. Let's kind of lay a foundation. Scott, who is Align? What do you guys do? How do you play in here?
That's a great question, Alan. So, and it's really the origin for our name, Align. We have found that companies need to look at their strategic objectives and align them with their compliance objectives. These compliance objectives have been more focused on security and how they mitigate cybersecurity risks. So Align is a partner to companies to help them demonstrate trust and respect to their stakeholders through these type of security and compliance reports across multiple frameworks that are out there in the marketplace right now.
Absolutely. And how long sort of the go-to-market, how do you reach these organizations? At what level do you play at here? I mean, obviously, when we talk about compliance, we talk about things like GDPR. We talk about things like the California CCA. But, I mean, those are, personal information compliance. There's a large spectrum of different compliance, as you were well aware, a large spectrum of different compliance regulations that different verticals have to play with.
Yes, we have a little over 2,400 clients. And our clients range from the SMB market, which we may say is 20 to 500 employees, to the enterprise space. And our focus is to help these companies. Oftentimes, a company in the SMB space will call us and they haven't even heard. They can spell SOC or ISO, but they don't know what that is. And they said, challenge is, we need you to help us win and retain this client. They said they're not going to sign with us or they're going to leave us if we go through this audit. Other companies say, I am totally drained. I'm performing 4 different assessments with 3 different vendors at 3 different times of the year. I have audit fatigue. Can you come help me consolidate these down to one? And as you look at these compliance frameworks, you mentioned some in the consumer area, some of the things in the B2B environment that we see, the frameworks have a lot of overlap. So once an organization is compliant with one, they may be 70% of the way with another one. And so we try to come and align those together. And really, I think in this time, as you think about people during the COVID crisis, is how do we help them focus on their business and less on the compliance framework? Because compliance isn't going away. People, as I always say, the attorneys at a big financial institution are still going to say, you still got to comply with these standards. We understand training on you, but you still have to comply. And so we come in here and try to say, let's put the burden of compliance on us. We provide you technology and the people to do that and allow you to focus on your business, because so oftentimes in this day, people will not do business with one another unless there's some trusted connection or report or validation of controls. And that's where we come in.
Absolutely. I will tell you, just, we're a small business here, right? 20, 25 people. And one of the things that I really dread is because we deal a lot with lead generation programs and so forth, right? So especially when we're dealing with European-based vendors, tool vendors, the contracts that they send you to sign to, we have to fill out what are our rules, regulations, processes, languages, they want everything because they want to know, are we a collector as defined by GDPR, or processor, what have you. And unfortunately, in a company this small, that falls on me of all people, right? Because I have the compliance security background. So I have to sit here and cut and paste stuff in and write stuff in. And to the point where, if it's not a big enough contract, I don't even want to waste my time with it because it's a drag. So there is a fatigue factor, as I think you called it, right? Of dealing with compliance issues. And that's just filling out the contract, Scott. That's not even really doing the compliance, so to speak, right? It is it's a bear. And that's, I guess, why companies like yours are here, right, to try to help out with this. Would you say GDPR at this point is the biggest driver of this, or what are some of the other regs that are driving it?
You bring up a great point, Alan. We thought GDPR of moving from Europe to the U.S. In 2018 was going to be a big factor for us for growth. I think what we saw similar to HIPAA on the healthcare side, you saw the regulation go into place, and it was 10 years before somebody went to jail for a HIPAA violation. And I can guarantee you they weren't the first violator of HIPAA. We thought the GDPR would be the big push forward. I think what we saw, though, Alan, with Facebook and other things, people are concerned about that. And until things are really cracked down on Facebook or Google or things of that nature, we're not going to see GDPR trickle down to this SMB market, to a company like yours as much. It's almost like the mindset of the IRS, they got bigger fish to fry, so let's focus on them. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the biggest driver coming part of some type of vendor or annual due diligence. And so it could be a situation where a provider says, we received the questionnaire from a brand new company, and they say we need to comply with a SOC 2 or an ISO. Depending upon the type of data we hold, it could be the federal government and FedRAMP. And we don't know what this is. And like you said, it's typically after a salesperson has agreed to everything in the contract, and now someone from IT ops or application development is calling us trying to comply with those controls. And it's our job to come in and say what does apply and walk them through the process from start to finish.
Got it. Let's talk a little bit about your unique, your company's unique approach to this, Scott. You mentioned that it's some people and it's some technology and apps and software, what have you. Give us a little bit more insight into that. How does it really work? do you assign a compliance expert who then goes through everything with these people, or is there maybe a DIY aspect by using your tool and so forth? What exactly?
I think we do a little bit of both, Alan. We don't want our clients to become compliance experts. That's why they bring us in. So they tell us, I've got these 3 frameworks to audit against. And I should say the old days, 10, 15 years ago, it was an Excel spreadsheet that was sent over to somebody. They, delegated out. They sent it back to the central person. They sent it over to the auditor via email. Then it became secure FTP. And oh, did you upload that? Or I had questions on it. We said, instead of asking for the same document 4 times, let's take a mapping of all the standards, all the documentation requests. And so our client comes in and says, I have to do these 3 compliance frameworks. We drill it down to the lowest common denominator of the one document they have to provide. They then get examples about what that document is. They get context around it, and then they can delegate it around to the rest of their team. And I tell you what, Alan, like you said, I could drive 4 hours and do this face-to-face with you in your office. Our people have the ability that our clients can delegate to wherever it may be for that person to gather the documentation back, put it in a central repository, do it one time, collect it once for audit for many reports, and they get immediate feedback on if something's accepted or rejected. And now we become the central point, as you stated before, about operating the controls. We now are the system of record for them demonstrating they operated their controls, and they can start looking at this over history. And with 2,400 companies, the analytics that you can provide to a customer to say, hey, here's when control failures typically happen. And we see control failures typically happen when people start working remote, when people are in a high stretch situation, things of that nature, that we can be a little bit more proactive with our client base. And so our application brings together and streamlines the compliance management platform, the compliance management frameworks and requests. And now with the globalization of where we're working, and how we're working remotely, allows us to continue to work and collaborate in this remote environment that we're in.
I mean, you're talking about working remote and levels of stress. I don't know if we've ever quite seen the working remote levels of stress that we're living in now. Scott, how is, I mean, it's kind of an elephant in the room. How has this whole COVID-19 situation affected business, what you're hearing from your customers, stuff like that, new customers?
Alan, we've seen our current client base really focusing on security and privacy still. Not new investments coming in, but not a shrinking of the budget. I read a recent article that PwC interviewed 1,600 publicly traded company CFOs, and only 2% said they were shrinking that security and compliance budget. They still have these needs as well. Additionally, we've seen lead flow from our business only off 10% of new customers. People are still focused on cybersecurity. This work from home, the attack vector has changed. Companies still have the same amount and maybe even greater concern, because now people are operating sensitive transactions in their own home rather than in a secure facility. We've had clients who operate call centers around the world. And as you know, you put a call center and build the infrastructure, and maybe in a country that doesn't have an infrastructure. And now you've said, we're going to take 5,000 people and give them computers and send them out to their homes with that poor infrastructure. And how do you secure that? So we've been really partnering with our clients on how to secure that, as well as the standard setting bodies that wrote these compliance standards and security frameworks never imagined the world that we're living in right now. And so how do you knowingly violate security controls so you can operate your business?
Yeah. I mean, and to me, Scott, the thing that hits home here is these security controls, these compliance controls were not, written and enacted with the present situation in mind. So you can't suspend them, though, because this is the time to almost double down on security and compliance, not ease off of it, right? Because we have this, unfortunately, this is the way the world we live in, and people are looking to take advantage of the situation. by the same token, it's very hard for you, Scott, to tell, one of your customers, remote workers, that his daughter's laptop, is riddled with malware or whatever, or is not locked down, because his daughter needs that because she's going homeschooling, teleschool, whatever you want to call it, and she needs those applications and her Instagrams and whatever else, Snapchats and everything else they're using. What's a compliance guy to do? I mean, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place here. What are you doing?
So we have created different frameworks for working from home based upon the standards. We've gone to the standard setting bodies and lobbied them. And it's interesting, the standard setting bodies, all but from the governmental side, have made changes. Maybe the governmental sides will happen as well because they're concerned about it. You're saying, take the government data now and you can work from home environment. And they're a little reluctant to do that, and I can understand why. So we're focused on how do we implement a new control? And so we've gotten together with our individual service line practice leads and developed frameworks around how the controls will be implemented working from home in accordance with those standard setting bodies, because we knowingly had our clients violate those prior controls just to be able to operate their business. So it's been a lot of partnering with them. You got to partner with the client to see what control can be implemented. Go back to the standard setting body and go, what do you think about this? Does it still mitigate the risk? And they look to you and say, do you feel comfortable signing off that it mitigates the risk as well? So those three bodies are working together, and we're seeing some great traction in that. And we're seeing larger clients like Tibco focus on strategic compliance. They said, we're going to take this approach and play offense into this. We're going to focus on how this has changed and how we can expand our footprint in compliance. And I think, as you said, from the bad guys getting worse, they're saying, how do we double down on this during this time so we come out stronger, so we invest in compliance? And so you're seeing forward-looking companies, I think, who have the resources to do so, double down on compliance.
Absolutely. Scott, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to now think about what the world that will be, right? We'll get through this, God willing, right? All healthy and well. Whether it's sometime this summer or fall or New Year, right? The new normal sets in. What effect do you think this all is going to have permanently on the compliance, security compliance landscape?
Alan, I think about the fact of you think about everything was on-prem and then everything got pushed to the cloud from a technology perspective, but you still had the individual workstations in an office. Now we're seeing maybe the next phase of it is the individual workstations come remote. It was always BYOD, bring your own device to the office. Now we're saying bring the work device into your home. And I think we're going to need to figure out how to secure that in the right way, develop standards on how that's going to be secured. Tell us as the assessors, how are we going to assess that? Because I'm not going to go to everybody's homes and check the security around that. And so I think you're going to see this distributed work environment have a situation where you have electronic policy-driven controls on workstations that really put most of the data back to the cloud and create, almost like a dumb terminal situation from your workstation perspective to mitigate that risk and reduce that risk into the cloud environment. Oftentimes people said their business continuity plan was just, we'll spin up from the West Coast, and we'll spin up the East Coast, and that's what we'll focus on, or else we'll transfer from Florida during hurricane season, we'll have our work done in Arizona. That can't happen now under the new norm. And so I think it's the courage to look at the new norm and to say, what controls do we have to implement? And I think it is, I'll call it co-opetition between us and our competitors getting together and thinking about how we're going to audit these things and create this framework and push the standard setting bodies for that, because we're closest to the actual implementation rather than standard setting bodies at compliance. So I do think you'll see a change. How quickly we'll see it from a contractual perspective and how quickly we will see attorneys want to back off what they're requiring people to do in those contracts, like yourself, that's going to take some cycles for sure.
Absolutely. Scott, I should have done it right in the beginning. People who want to find out more information about Align, where do they go?
They go to a-lign.com.
a-lign.com.
Bingo.
Align.com. Hey, we're about out of time. I want to, first of all, thank you for the job you guys are doing during this time, because it needs to get done, and companies are kind of, in a pinch behind the eight ball here, but nevertheless, companies like Align are helping them through this. Secondly, thanks for, introducing Align to our audience. It's a good thing for them to know about, and we hope to have you back on here.
Thank you so much, Alan, for the opportunity, and I enjoyed it as well. Thank you, sir.
All right. Scott Price, CEO of Align, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay, from our archives for today, something old. I went back to our Kubernetes virtual event from fall last year. And this is an interview we did, or actually a presentation that I did with Tim Hockin. Tim is, of course, a member of the Kubernetes engineering team at Google that, founded Kubernetes. Tim's still at Google, and he's a visionary. So Tim's going to give us his thoughts from there on the future of Kubernetes. So from the archives, here's Tim Hockin of Google.
All right, so Tim, first of all, thanks for being one of our keynotes on this Kubernetes Ecosystem Summit. I wanted to discuss a couple of things with you today, and I guess chronologically, let's go back to the beginning. Many people know that you were, part of the original, not the original Google engineering team, but part of the Kubernetes team. But I don't know if everyone knows it, and I don't know if really they understood what your role was. And can you give us a little bit about what your place was on that team, and kind of what was the goal there? What were you guys trying to do when this Kubernetes project first kind of took off?
So when we started all this, there was a big reorg that happened internally, and they took our cloud team and our technical infrastructure team, TI, smushed them together. And through the power of fusion, we became one team, and sort of instantaneously our goals aligned, which of course is not really what happened. But
right.
We had a bunch of meetings. The mission was figure out how to stop stepping on each other, how to stop duplicating each other's work, how to build a single system that serves both purposes. And so we had a series of meetings that we presented ideas at and discussed, and it was engineers from Seattle, Joe and Brendan, and engineers from down here, myself and Brian and others. And we started ideating on a bunch of just random thoughts. Right? Maybe it was Borg as a service, maybe it was something container-based, and Joe and Brendan saw what was happening with Docker, and they started to whip up this prototype. And my role at the time, I was actually working on our internal team on the node agent for Omega and Borg, which was Omelet and Borglet. When the team started to come together around Kubernetes or around containers, my first job was to figure out the node side of things. Right? What are the agents that are going to be running on the machine? What do they do? What do they do in terms of lifecycle management, in terms of storage management and networking? And so the earliest versions of Kubelet, after it came out of sort of prototype stage, was where I spent most of my time.
Absolutely. And as the sort of team coalesced, and the idea of doing something around containers, and was it called even Kubernetes at that point, or K8, or was
No, the name Kubernetes came pretty late in the game. At the time, the prototype was called 7, and so people were hacking on 7, and that was really it.
It's funny that was 7 and now it's sort of K8. But this was, at this point, was there any thought of like creating an open source project that would live and exist outside of Google, or?
Absolutely. The open source was definitely part of the strategy. Once we decided that we weren't going to be shooting for an as-a-service sort of thing, it obviously had to be open source. That was the only way we were going to get traction and get buy-in from the broader community. So open source was it. From the beginning, we knew we wanted to go big with open source in a way that not a lot of projects really do, which was really to drive ownership, to get people out in the world to feel like this was their project. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that was very successful. Very strategically valuable to the project, to the success of it overall. I don't think it would be where it is if we hadn't gone big on that.
No, but it's a little bit of a chicken and egg issue too, I think, Tim, because one of the things I've kind of observed from attending Cloud Native Con, KubeCons and these kinds of things is that really a lot of what's driving the underlying energy behind these things is open source, right? The Cloud Native and Cube movement, if you will, or the foundation behind it, right, has given the open source community a place to coalesce around, something to gather and hold up there. We had Linux before this, obviously, but this is really taking that open source community and giving it a home and a voice and power like it's never had, frankly. And I can't imagine that you guys back then would think, my goodness, look what it's become.
That's true. It is definitely sort of beyond wildest expectations. You're right. Linux existed. Open source existed for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I cut my teeth on open source in the 90s, working on Linux and early versions of Red Hat and those sorts of things. And so I grew up sort of with that ethos of like, you're just going to write code and people are going to benefit from it. And that's this is the way you do things, right? Long before I ever did commercial software, I was doing open source. And then, I sort of came to Google and I took a very different track through Google. I worked on some, internal stuff that wouldn't make sense externally, and I lost track of open source. And when I came back to Kubernetes, the world is totally different. The open source world is a very different animal than it was in the 90s, right? And there was still, open source was still there, but what we tried to do with Kubernetes was a community that was very intentional, that was very broad and deep on purpose and not sort of by accident. And I mean no disrespect at all to the Linux community. The Linux community grew from nothing to what it is now over 20 years, right? We didn't want to wait 20 years.
Probably longer even, yeah.
Yeah, right. So we didn't want 20 years for Kubernetes to try to take off. We were trying to do something big and now and immediate. And the Linux community is sort of the result of the engineering that went into it. We wanted to start with a community first point of view where we said the community is a big part of what makes the project successful, and that was really key to Kubernetes.
Sure. Just another quick question or two on that, and then we'll kind of fast forward to today. You mentioned that the team had sort of seen what Simon and the Docker guys were doing, and of course, Docker's not the first container. We've had Google's used Linux containers for years, and the world has used Linux containers for years, but it showed people, I think, what can be done here. Everyone started instantly, because so much in tech, it's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. And I know you see something and you say, my goodness, why didn't I think of that, right? It was so elementary. And I think that's what happened with Docker. People saw immediately the potential of it. But yet there was also immediately a notion that we need something to orchestrate this. We need something to pull these containers together. And at the time, there were a lot of wannabe contenders out there in the world. Kubernetes has obviously won this race or war or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a war. It was actually fairly cooperative. But what do you attest that to? Because I mean, even in internet time, this has happened in the beat of a Thanos snap or whatever. It's happened really quick.
Yeah. it's funny you say everybody thought that we would need this orchestration stuff. Actually, I think there was a lot of contention at the beginning of whether we would need that or not. Docker took tools that existed, right? They didn't really invent containers.
No.
In the sense the kernel technology existed. They were gluing together a dozen different bits of technology. What they nailed was a UX, a mindset, a workflow that resonated for people really deeply. Around the same time, we were open sourcing some internal tools. Literally our container stack from Google internal, we called it "Let me contain that for you," and we were open sourcing it. We hadn't quite open sourced it at the time that Docker landed. We open sourced it later in 2013, and it's the same tools, same technologies under the covers, wildly different UX, right? Like the way it approaches application development is totally different. And I think it works well for a place like Google where we control the development experience. It doesn't work so well out in the wild. And I can see that now. And it's exactly like you said, when Docker came out with your UX, and first I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Who would work this way? And then I started using it, and I realized, actually, this is really slick, right? And of course, as soon as I saw that, I played it in the context of what I already knew about Borg. I looked at Docker, and I went, well, it's like Borglet, but like prehistoric, right? But it'll get there. But you can't have Borglet without Borg. And it was immediately obvious to us, those of us who'd used Borg internally, that we needed something bigger to manage all these machines. This idea of just using a single machine and using containers as a better deployment vehicle wasn't enough, right? So I think that's the bit that we added to the conversation. Docker, as on the track that it was on its way towards Swarm, which was an interesting approach to it, but we looked at it from the Borg point of view and went, not the right abstraction, right? And so we came at it from this Borg point of view, and you're right, it happened so fast. I'm
a little older than you, Tim, but I remember hypervisor catching on, right? And that probably took at least 4 or 5 years before you had Zen and you had obviously VMware became a monster, and the Red Hat, was it KVR or whatever, but this has happened in half the time of the hypervisor. So it's crazy now, but I think again, sometimes the stars just line up right? And I think one of the things that's helped us with Kubernetes is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and we're going to be hearing from, Dan Kahn and some of the other board members of CNCF later. Did you have any insight? Obviously, I think CNCF has become a catalyst for acceleration of Kubernetes in the market. I don't want to use the word dominance, but Kubernetes' place in the market. Did you see that coming at all, or what, if you can, just not speaking on behalf of the whole team, speaking on behalf of Tim, what did you think when the idea of, hey, let's give Kubernetes to the CNCF, to the Linux Foundation, in essence?
And that was part of the conversation really early on.
Was it?
We knew, even though we wanted to go big with open source, we knew that there's a sort of inherent mistrust of corporate-owned open source sometimes, right? And Google, honestly, had not earned a great track record with putting things out and then sort of abandoning them. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't sort of fall victim to our ancestors' mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so it was really important that we get it out into a place that wasn't going to go away. Even if Google's interest dried up and blew away, that it was safe, right? And we wanted to get ownership. We wanted to get people who had full project access from day one, right? And it was super important that you get the Red Hats and the CoreOSs and the other people who had full access. Not just I can tinker around and send patches, but I can check things in, I can approve things. That was super important from the beginning. So the foundation, I think, was really part of the strategy. And there was a lot of discussion of, do we want the Kubernetes Foundation, or what is the scope of this thing? What are we going to call it? What is the mission really? And I think the term cloud native took a while to catch on. And even at the beginning, I remember telling it to people, and they were like, well, what does that mean, right? But I think the mindset has started to really work for people, and I think that the choice of words there was really brilliant.
I have to agree with you. So, my background is more in cybersec now, but we called it InfoSec. And I remember when cloud security first, became a thing. And so cloud native to us was readily apparent, because too many people were taking endpoint security, moving into the cloud and saying, voila, cloud security. We knew you had to have security designed in the cloud, for the cloud, by the cloud. And I think it's gone beyond security now to software. But the other thing about it, though, is, again, who's the caboose and who's the engine here? Without Kubernetes, I don't know how much of this cloud native movement that we have today would exist.
I agree. Kubernetes, I think, was the catalyst that helps people see how things could be done. Docker was maybe the raw materials, and Kubernetes is the thing that really got the chain reaction going. Yeah. It took this idea from abstract of, we can manage your deployments for you, don't worry about it, into the really concrete of like, look, really, it's that easy. I remember doing a talk at Usenix Lisa a few years back, and I did a room full of sysadmins, classic Unix sysadmin people, right? Of which I considered myself one of. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I went up there and I basically automated 2/3 of their jobs on the stage, right? And afterwards, people came up to me and were like, "This is incredible! Like, how did you do that?" Yeah. Right? Now, of course, there was the other third who was skeptical or had really great questions or comments, and I hope that we've addressed a lot of those now. But I remember feeling really, at that moment, that day, that we hit it. We hit something.
Right. That's amazing. Let me, Tim, if you don't mind, I want to turn our interview now from backward looking to forward looking. So as we sit here now, it's the summer of 2019. The next KubeCon is actually later this month in Shanghai, and then there'll be one in San Diego in the fall, winter. Where are we going? I mean, has Kubernetes, are we in a post-Kubernetes world now, or what's the story?
We love to talk about boring infrastructure, right? That's sort of the key words. We've been quoted on these things all the time, and I think we're getting there. I hope that a couple years from now, we're not talking about what's hot in the newest release of Kubernetes. That it's sort of like the Linux kernel. Like, there's some stuff in there, but the vast majority of people, the vast majority of their problems are already solved, right? And they're working with it, and new releases come out, but nobody feels urgent pressure to pick them up. That unless you're bleeding edge, right, or you're building these things, and that it's just sort of a non-issue. People don't worry about where they're getting their Kubernetes or how it looks or whether it works well. It's just a thing that you use, right? And people are focusing their energy on the exciting stuff that's happening up the stack, right? Yeah. Whether that's the service meshes. I mean, that's sort of the next thing today. So where are we going to be in 2 or 3 years? Probably beyond that, right? I mean, I hope so. There's the serverless frameworks, and there's you're going to build more and more abstractions up and up the stack, which just benefits users. The higher up the stack people can live, the better off they're going to be.
Agreed. And you mentioned a couple of things I wanted to hit on: service mesh and Istio, and but all of these things, again, so much in technology is evolutionary, not revolutionary, and it's built. So we have that containerd Docker container, and we have the Kubernetes kind of thing on it, and now you're going to have mesh on top. But really what we're building, and I spoke about it today, I was at a conference, I think I mentioned to you in San Francisco, what we've really built here is a new OS for the data center. And that data center happens to be the cloud in most cases, but it's a new OS there that, and it was probably time, to tell you the truth, because even though we had the hypervisor, we were still running our old OSs on top of them to 95%.
We're still running our old OSs in there, right? But they're now a tiny little detail of the implementation that most users are not particularly coupled to.
No.
Right.
Right. I mean, and you know this as well as I. There was times where we'd have religious wars about even what Linux distribution you were using, right?
Yeah.
You don't hear that as much anymore with.
Well, now it's which cloud are you using, or which Kubernetes are you using, or which network drivers are you using, which service mesh are you using, right? People love to factionalize, and they will do that no matter what we do. If we can give them good things to argue about, like the relative merits of different systems, that's a great thing to argue about.
Better to argue about that than some of the older things we've argued about. You mentioned serverless.
Sure.
So we have we get a lot of interest on that from our audience, and some people say, well, you still need Kubernetes with serverless. Other people say not necessarily. What's kind of your view on serverless and the Kubernetes relationship?
I don't think you need Kubernetes for serverless. I think the abstractions should be relatively sealed and hermetic. Kubernetes is a great way for serverless systems to sort of pop the hood and let users get down into the guts of things. So if you're running a serverless on top of Kubernetes, to be able to say, look, this isn't working for me anymore, I need more control, that you just sort of open the escape hatch and drop down a layer, and now you control all the pieces. Right?
No longer serverless.
Exactly. Right. But you made that choice, right? And you know sort of where the boundaries are of the different layers. I think that's a really great model to shoot for. I don't think it requires that things be Kubernetes. Like literally, they don't have to be. As long as you can capture this experience that I think users want, I think that's the win.
So I think there's two views on it. One is the user view. What you're saying is, can I capture what the users want? Great. But I think a flip side to it is, I learned this when we built an intrusion detection. We moved it to intrusion prevention, so automatic blocking. People love the idea in abstract, but in practice, I don't want you blocking anything until I made sure you really. And it's the same thing with moving to serverless. Yeah, I'll let it do that to a point, but I need to know that at the drop of a hat I can.
Maybe.
Drop back in.
I mean, I'm a big fan of systems like App Engine, right, which were like 10 plus years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It's still an amazing system. It's just not in alignment with the rest of the industry trend right now, right? So when you look at things like Knative, right, where you capture some of the ideals of App Engine, but you say, look, it's done on Kubernetes, in a Kubernetes way, in a Kubernetes style, I think that's a really powerful abstraction. And, it's really skeletal and primitive right now. But if you sort of squint and play out the sort of App Engine-y serverless framework, pick your favorite serverless, I think there's amazing possibilities there, all the way up to including things like Lambda, right? Yeah. Where Lambda sort of right now positioned as the holy grail of, I don't need to know anything about what's happening. I just write some code and ta-da.
And run it. Yeah. So you mentioned Lambda. Well, I don't want to get into a Google Cloud or anything like that. Last question for you, Tim, and we've taken enough of your time. And so what's next for Tim?
What's next for me? I have more work to do. Kubernetes is not done in any sense. It's somewhat fractal. The closer I get to it, the more details we see and we need. So there's a ton of work to do, and there's exciting stuff to do, really sort of phase 2 stuff, right? I think we're coming to the end of what I think of as phase 1 of Kubernetes, right? Ubiquity is close. The APIs are starting to show their age. We're starting to see the cracks and the gaps, and we're looking for enhancements, better ways of describing things that are that warrant the level of complexity that we didn't want to build into the system at the beginning, right? I spend a lot of my time looking at networking, so I'm looking at all the gaps around networking and multi-cluster and those sorts of issues, and they're plenty, right? We have real customers who are doing amazing things. They need multiple clusters, they need multiple environments, they need multi-tenancy, they need bigger storage, deeper integrations. I'm really interested by these things, and I'm going to spend my next years looking at that.
I think it's a worthy call. Very good. Tim, thanks so much. Tim Hockin of Google's engineering team, one of the original Kubernetes team members and a continuing force in the community. Thank you very much, and we hope you have a great rest of our day here at the Kubernetes Ecosystem Summit.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Okay, everyone, back here in the studio, and it's that time of day we're going to do some news, a couple headlines from around Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps.com. As always, caveat, there's plenty more where this came from. Go check out the sites for more information if you want to find out what's happening in the world of cybersecurity, DevOps, cloud native, digital transformation. But for now, let me tell you what's happening. Security Boulevard, we've got a report finds more vulnerable devices than ever. And that's discouraging, I know. But, you know, there's lies, damn lies, and then vulnerability statistics. So Mike Vizard has a good report on this, and check that article out. Also up on the Boulevard, why consumers are needed to make cybersecurity matter. And the point of it is we can do our best with B2B cybersecurity, but it's the B2C that makes it happen. And when consumers get on the bandwagon, we see it happening. But check out the article for more info. Over on Container Journal, we have a good article for news from our friends at Chef. Chef extends Windows Kubernetes support. Pretty cool. And then the LNF adds platform as a service to build CNIs. So that is another good one up on Container Journal. Container Journal, look, if you're into Kubernetes Cloud Native, microservices, great place to get information. Over on DevOps.com, we have an article with the Linux Foundation, aligns with ISO. Makes sense. The Eclipse Foundation is moving their headquarters to Brussels. And then F5 Networks dives into app performance analytics. And I think we're seeing F5 really become much more active in the DevOps, APM kind of spaces, as they move beyond their kind of big box and network and cloud traffic shaping heritage. So good to see some movement there from F5. Anyway, that's the news for today. As I say, there's a lot more on all three sites. Go check them out. DevOps.com, ContainerJournal.com, SecurityBoulevard.com. But for now, let's get ready to limber up. Our one and only Jeremy Jones, personal trainer extraordinaire, is going to do a work from home fitness with Jeremy Jones segment. Jeremy, we're going to hand it over to you.
Hey guys, Jeremy here with another workout from home video. If you missed any of our previous episodes, you can always go to TechStrong.tv, check out some of our previous workouts. You can also download it on Roku, Amazon Fire, as well as Apple TV. So guys, what we're doing with this episode is we're going to develop a workout that you could do, in the comfort of your own home as we're all socially distancing, quarantining, staying at home. These are some workouts that you could do with household items that you can find in your house. So what we're going to do today is start out with a warm-up, then we'll jump into the workout, but as it's very important to get our warm-up in, so let's get started. All right, guys, we're going to do each of these warm-ups for about 20 to 30 seconds each. We're going to start out with our alternating lunges, so we're going to step forward. Now make sure you don't want that momentum carrying you forward. So we're going to step and then take those hips right down, alternating each side. I want you to take nice wide steps. Give yourself a nice base. Good. We're going to go alternating each side. We'll go one more on each side. One more on each side. Finish up last one, and then we'll move directly into our lateral lunges. So with the lateral lunges, we're going to take our feet wider than shoulder width apart. Hips are going to go back, so we're going to push out to the right, bring it up, and then extend over to the other side. Okay, so we're going to lean into the right, again, clearing those hips out of the way, take it down to the left, take it down as far as you can. What you want to do is try to get a little bit deeper into the stretch on each side. So as we're progressing, get a little bit deeper into those stretches. Okay, we'll go one more each side. Good, last one. And we'll move into our hamstring stretches. So I'm going to extend my right foot out on my heel, take it down, try to touch my toes. alternate, and move it to the other side. Good. If you can't quite make it down all the way, if you could just make it to your knee, just as long as you can feel that stretch right in the back of your leg, throughout your hamstrings, that's what we're looking for. We want to get those nice and loose. Good. Go a couple more here. Last one. And with our steam engines, okay, hands behind your head. You're gonna take your right knee, try to press it up to your right elbow, and then alternate on the other side. Clear open those hips, get that nice hip flexibility. Again, if you can't, get your knees all the way up, get them up as high as you can. Make sure you externally rotate that knee, bring it up as high as you can. Good, open up those hips. We'll go one more each side. Last one. I'm gonna finish it off with our squat. Again, weight back on your heel, take it down for a squat, far down as you can go, and we're gonna come up into rotation. So squat into rotation. Get a nice full turn so you feel it in your scapula, your shoulder blade, really feel it extending. Good, full rotation. Getting a little bit deeper on these squats. Go one more each side. Good. All right, guys, now that we're warmed up, let's jump into the workout. Okay, guys, so for today, with our workout, we're gonna pick the one household item that you're gonna have. So today, we're going to take shoes, right? Everybody's got shoes. You can even raid your significant others if you don't have enough. So any shoe will do. And what we're gonna do with those is we're gonna build out a plyometric workout. So plyo, a lot of people think of it, so a good example of it would be jumping rope, any type of jumping. So for this workout, we will have some alternatives for those of us with, bad ankles, bad knees, bad hips. There can be a little bit of, it might be a little bit more impact than you would want. So we'll have some alternatives for those, but we're gonna try to be as plyometric as possible with this workout. Great way to burn calories and get that heart rate up. So we're gonna do 5 rounds today. So for each of these, we're gonna go down and back. All right, so we'll go over each of these and show you how each of these are done. All right, guys, so for today's layout, as you can see, we've got 6 shoes lined up roughly about 1.5 feet apart. And I'm gonna use this as my spacing, so I'm gonna be going all the way up and all the way back. So for some of you, this may be a little bit higher than you wanna go. So if you wanna take something smaller, a piece of tape, a rolled up towel, a shirt, something like that, where you're not going as far over, certainly don't want a tripping hazard. I set up 6 here. Obviously there would be space limitations for some of you. So if you wanna go a little bit further, or if you maybe can't fit 6 across, that's fine, we'll adapt. So what we're gonna do first is run off the 2-foot forward run. So for my 2-foot forward run, I'm gonna be stepping over that first shoe. I'm gonna plant both feet, making sure to land on the balls of my feet. You never wanna land flat-footed, especially when doing plyometrics. So we're gonna go foot in, foot in, foot in, foot in, super simple. So that's 2 feet in, we're gonna take it all the way down, turn it around, bring it all the way back. For my second one, we're gonna go a single leg hop forward. So standing on 1 foot, I'm going to hop forward. Let's keep it on the same foot. Now on my way back, I'm gonna move it over to the other side. So if you can't quite do the single leg hop, you could do what we did with the 2-foot step and just run that back again. So if you can't quite get the 1-foot hop. Next up, we're gonna do a 2-foot lateral hop. So I'm gonna jump back to where I'm even with the shoe, jump in, between, right? So back and in, all right? So next up, we've got our skiers. So again, I'm gonna start behind this first shoe. I'm gonna go left foot in, right? My right foot's outside, my left foot's inside. Then I'm gonna alternate, all right? So all the way down, bring it all the way back. Next up, we're gonna go in, out. So both feet are in, both feet are out. In, out, in, out. Progress all the way down, keep it on the same side, bringing it all the way back. Last but certainly not least, we've got our swing squat. So when I've got the shoes, I'm gonna step forward for my swing squat. My feet are gonna be outside, bring them in. I'm standing, out, then back in, okay? All the way down, bring it all the way back. All right, guys, let's run it through one of our circuits, show you what this looks like. All right, guys, so here's circuit number 1. Again, we're doing our 2-foot run. We're gonna get those knees up high, all the way up, bring it back, turn around, all the way back. I even missed one there. Okay, next up, our single leg forward hop. Left foot only. Again, nice and slow the first time. Once you get used to it, now I'm gonna move over to my right foot. Good, my 2-foot lateral hop. So even, out, even, out. Good, now I'm just gonna reverse it and go in the other direction. I already feel my heart rate getting up there. Whew. Next up, skiers. So I'm gonna go to my left, right, right. Turn it around, move the other direction. Good, next up, swing squats. Okay, out and in, out and in, out and in, out and in. Good, turn around. Telling you what, my legs are on fire right now, by the way, guys. Good. Now I'm going to take a 1-minute rest, and we'll go through the next. Catch my breath. We'll go through the next round. All right, guys. As you can tell, I'm still out of breath. So we're going to take a minute rest, then finish our other 4 rounds. So, especially for my beginners and my more intermediate, if you need to take 10 to 20 seconds when moving between these exercises, feel free to do so. Maintain steady breathing. Again, you want to go in through the nose, out through the mouth. That's how you calm your heart rate down, recover a little bit more quickly. So take 10 to 20 seconds if needed in between. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions, any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at Jeremy, that's Jeremy, @devops.com. And I hope you guys are staying safe. I'll see you next time.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, for another great workout session. Appreciate it. I don't know if I mentioned, we're going to be adding a yoga session once a week as well to our work from home fitness slate. So be on the lookout for that. But for now, though, let's head over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene has a good interview with SecureLink CISO Tony Howlett for today. Over to you, Charlene.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Tony Howlett, who is the CISO at SecureLink. Tony, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Great. So you've been doing some great contributed posts over on Security Boulevard on IoT security, but I do want to talk a little bit about the security of online collaboration tools such as video conferencing platforms. So obviously we've been hearing, especially in the early days of the kind of work at home or work from home edict, if you will. A lot of organizations were experiencing some issues with security of Zoom and other video collaboration devices. And so, obviously this has been a topic of conversation for more than a few companies. So, what are you hearing now in this space? I mean, has enough time passed that organizations are getting better at the security of these tools and using them more effectively and securely?
Yeah, no, I think what we had here is this set of tools or technology that was sort of a nice to have before. Mm-hmm. It was sort of an ancillary technology to your core productivity tech, and it went to being vital overnight of this is how we're going to run our business and do all of our communications or a lot of our meetings. And you're really talking about a lot of technology that wasn't designed for that, at least not at that scale. And then you throw in that, we had to do these flash deployments overnight, right, of either acquiring new technology if you didn't have it or scaling up what you had. And that's a pretty perfect storm for security issues and problems. You're stressing operationally what this technology can do and the staffs and so forth. And then you're also, of course, stressing the security and doing a lot of things that maybe it wasn't intended to be used for, or at least in that volume. So you're going to find, this is where you find the sort of a stress testing that we didn't mean to do. So that's where a lot of this has come from. Mm-hmm. And I think mostly the vendors have stepped up pretty admirably. In most cases, Zoom is probably the most prominent in the media. They did have a number of issues. Mm-hmm. Again, most of this tech was designed with ease of use over security because it was being used as a one-to-many sort of tech. And now we're going to a one-to-one or small groups of people that we don't want anyone to be able to join the webinar. So that had to be rethought. And I think most of the companies have stepped up and patched and done things to make it more secure. And along with that, the companies have had to, there's a learning curve, right, with the staffs and with the employees, some of whom maybe never used a video conference tool if they weren't in sales or marketing. And they had to learn both the technology and the decorum of what's appropriate and how to make it work properly.
Yeah. So, to your point about everybody kind of being, obviously all of a sudden this is the way that organizations are working, and it doesn't just stop at the business. It's also the schools, and it's a lot of, telemedicine and a lot of just a lot of ways in which video collaboration tools are being used these days. Do you think that kind of opens up the idea of having maybe different platforms or different maybe levels of security or levels of user friendliness, if you will, for these video collaboration tools based on what they're being used for?
Certainly, yes. I think initially many companies just tried to modify their existing tech that maybe marketing had control of, their GoToWebinar, mm-hmm. Or whatever tech they had. And maybe that's appropriate. But in many cases, I think we're going to see a bifurcation or balkanization, if you will, of this is going to be for tech and for technical conversations. Maybe we'll use Slack. For board meetings, we're going to use Zoom. And we're going to continue to use GoToWebinar, but it's again been a kind of a rush to figure out technology, acquire new vendors, and all that thing in a matter of days or weeks versus the normal months, year-long process you might go through to interview vendors. So I do think companies are finding not every tool is appropriate for every use, and they might need to have a couple of tools. Mm-hmm. I know we have two at our company that we use primarily.
Okay. All right. So are there security considerations that companies, even, 2 months or however long this is that we're in this in this situation, that maybe they're still not getting right, they're still not understanding the importance of?
So I think we've gotten through that first phase mostly of the let's lock down the meetings so people can't Zoom bomb or what have you. That's the first thing, and that's the initial thing we thought, what are the dangers here? But really there's some deeper implications that we need to look at, long-term use in this manner. So there's legal implications that we're now possibly recording all of our meetings, every little meeting we have in our office. And before you possibly could say things in confidence, knowing that it was only in that room, but maybe that's saved on a server. Maybe that's then presented as evidence and subpoenaed in a deposition. So we have to think about that. Also, privacy issues, certainly with employees and with other things. And then again, just what are the policies about, how you can present a meeting, what you can say, and things that were appropriate in a private setting before, possibly not in something that's going to be, and in similar ways, many ways to what we went through with email, where when people would write letters in the old days, you did it a certain way. It was very formal, and we get into email and we don't need to capitalize everything. And I think that's matured. We've understood that, hey, this is written in stone somewhere, and we have to make it, ready for prime time. And I think the same thing is going to happen with this video conferencing technology now that it's being used much more broadly. I mean, if you did a survey before, you might have found a small, maybe a quarter of companies, a third of companies, maybe less, that were using it regularly. And of course, now it might be 90% plus. So.
Right. Yeah, I know that a number of companies are really looking long term at how they're going to operate their business even after the U.S. opens up again, and other countries. And this is truly a global issue that we're experiencing. Obviously not just with the pandemic, but how companies are going to operate. And so obviously this tool is kind of becoming, as you said, more of a must-have technology rather than a nice to have. So, moving forward, do you think that we kind of are going to be adopting maybe a new mindset when it comes to how we communicate online and how we hold meetings and maybe just the way we go about doing business online versus that in-person interaction?
Certainly. I think there's going to be a lot of broader systemic and societal change that comes out of this. And I'm not the first person to think it, but a lot more work from home, both pushing from the employee side, wanting what we've had over the last 7 weeks or 8 weeks on a more permanent basis. And also the companies saying, well, we went online. It didn't kill us. We were able to do business. Maybe we can rethink our situation with offices and office space and save money there. So I think, again, the technology is going to have to step up to support it. I think we're seeing this sort of amateur hour of the technology, that it supported certain functions, but there's a lot missing there. So there's a lot of opportunity for both the existing collaboration and video conference tech to step up, and new entrants that will think of it kind of like Slack did with chat and that thing, where they reinvented it a bit and made it fit this developer mindset. The same thing's going to have to happen with video conferencing technology and archiving and just legal compliance, all the kind of runs that I don't even think we touched on before because it was used so minimally and so sort of superficially.
Right.
But it's going to come. I don't think we're going to ever go back. The quote unquote new normal will probably mean a lot more of this. We might save money and go to less meetings, travel to meetings, more conferences. I think, it's been a struggle, but we're starting to see some new ways of doing business that technology finally kind of enables us to do. So there'll be some positive come out of it, as well as additional work for security and compliance people like myself.
Right. So I imagine also the storage of all of this data that's being created from all these meetings. There are certainly, obviously, security considerations about that, but also if you're thinking about data, unstructured data, and how and even whether organizations need to hold on to certain types of data, that also kind of brings up some data analysis considerations as well. So, when we're looking at that from a security perspective, do you think we're going to get to a point where we really do need to hold on to all of these meetings and have an archive that, is could be something as pedestrian as, what did you do this weekend? And let's have a virtual happy hour, things like that. How do we go about dealing with all of that data and making sure that we're saving the right stuff?
So I'll give you the nightmare scenario and the utopia scenario, probably be somewhere in between, because I have both feelings. I think there's a lot of angst and worry in my side that now, again, we're looking at, are we going to see, one-on-ones and interviews and reviews being depositioned? Hey, I got fired. Let's go back and look at that one-on-one. And did the manager say something inappropriate or not tell me what to do or so forth? Imagine all those being documented, more than just a line in a note, but I can actually look at the interview. Scary stuff for corporate attorneys to think about. And that'll all have to be thought about. Privacy, or if I'm in a meeting with a customer, am I now gathering data on a consumer that needs to be treated a certain way? Then on the upside, though, I think about, like you said, with all of this data out there and video, and if we tap into AI and voice recognition, and if it goes another generation or two, maybe now I can search, hey, I remember, I don't have to take notes. I remember in a meeting we discussed this. Let me pull up the transcript. There's so some really cool stuff about it, being able to dive into what was said 3 years ago in that meeting with such and such a customer. Let's go look. Oh yeah, we agreed to this. So there's some really cool stuff that can come out of it, as always, and there's some negative things that will come from it, but we're not going back, right? I think we're only going to go forward with this. There's probably only going to be more of it. We might see some of it start to go away, but companies have seen the benefit. Employees have seen the benefits. So I think, we're going to have to deal with it. It's here to stay.
Yeah, I think this phase 2, if you will, of using these collaboration tools, there will definitely have to be a larger and deeper conversation around privacy issues related to that. But the same thing could be said for the IoT devices that a lot of folks are using these days as well, both in the company and in the home. So, do you actually see IoT playing a larger role as we kind of move into this new normal of working from home, either full-time or part-time?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll speak specifically to this pandemic that we're in and things like contact tracing. We can leverage cameras, IP-enabled cameras, to say, here's a public space, here's all the people that they interacted with, or in a workplace environment, here's all the places that person, conference rooms they went into. So, definitely we can leverage it from a public health standpoint. Of course, they've talked about tracking your phone. So in China, they're using apps to see where people went. I don't know that we'll see, it's going to be more difficult here because of the pushback, but there's an obvious benefit, is you don't have to rely on the person's memory. Okay, you tested positive. Who did you interact with? Well, I can remember, 5, but with a cell phone, we can literally tell everywhere you went. Big brotherish, yes. Benefit, yes. So there's going to have to be that balance of what we're willing to allow in order to move. Hopefully the next time this comes around, again, not just the clinical testing, the medical testing, but we have better tech, like I was talking about, to deal with it, to really quickly, because there's just no way, and this has been said on the news, that we can literally do contact tracing in any kind of scale. Right. Like for a whole city's worth of people, when you have thousands of cases, to try to do that with the way they've done it before, which was interviews, is never going to work. And it's not accurate. But using technology, we probably can get there.
Lots of stuff to think about. We've got, obviously we've got issues of privacy that a lot of folks are grappling with now. And to your point, that there are a lot of benefits to this, but certainly there are larger conversations and arguments to be made on both sides. So Tony, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me about this today. It's I think it's one of those conversations that is going to evolve as the technology and this pandemic evolve. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Charlene. I really enjoyed it.
Great. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlene. Our next segment is, of course, the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategy Groups, will give us some of his own insights and commentary. And then Mitchell also today has an interview with another ASG analyst, Mark Hornbeek. Mark's got about 30, 40 years of QA engineer background behind him. But Mark is also the author of Engineering DevOps, and he's recently come out with a whole series now of videos and instructional tutorials on engineering DevOps. It's available as part of the ASG platform, and you know, Accelerated Strategies Group, knowledge wants to be free. They make everything available for free. It's open to everyone, and this one is no different. In Engineering DevOps, Episode 1, what is DevOps? Mark Hornbeek is going to give us that. And I think you're going to find it interesting. Mark's a knowledgeable guy. If you're on the technical side of the house, I think you'll appreciate how Mark approaches his whole approach to engineering DevOps. So let's head over now to Mitchell Ashley and Mark Hornbeek from Accelerated Strategies Group, and we'll be back.
Coming up, we have a segment around engineering DevOps. It's actually one of our analysts, Mark Hornbeek, who wrote the book, Engineering DevOps. He's actually put together an overview of several of the chapters of his books, kind of in a tutorial fashion, to give folks concepts and some basis in things like value stream management, and how you do assessments, and what he calls the 9 pillars. So let's take it to Mark Hornbeek to hear some more about engineering DevOps.
Hello, my name is Mark Hornbeek, and I'm about to start a tutorial. What is engineering DevOps? I am the CEO and principal consultant for Engineering DevOps Consulting. I am an analyst for the Accelerated Strategies Group and an ambassador for the DevOps Institute. I'm also author of the book depicted on the left here, Engineering DevOps, and this tutorial is the first in a series that explains, engineering DevOps and how to go about implementing DevOps according to good engineering practices. Further information about this can be found on my website, engineeringdevops.com. So, without further ado, let's get started. What is engineering DevOps? This tutorial tries to answer one question that I think is a good starting point for the tutorial series. What are the key ingredients to assure success with DevOps? Time and time again in my consulting practice, I hear people say, well, DevOps is really CI/CD pipeline and the associated tools. But in truth, really it's much more than that. It's really important to take into account what I call the top 3 ingredients for DevOps that have to work together to really realize a good operating DevOps environment for any application. So people, process, technology, all together need to be engineered carefully and in balance to realize a well-functioning DevOps environment. I like to use an analogy. I happen to like the book Camelot and the story of King Arthur. So you'll see in these tutorials, I use some images, and I also use the images in my book associated with the Arthurian, mythology. The round table on the left is representative of people, the idea that people come together and with empathy and share things rather than anyone being dictatorial or that. But DevOps is all about having a collaborative culture. So that's what that round table is showing. The laws of Camelot are analogous to the process. So, King Arthur tried to put together an idealistic kingdom where he had fair laws and laws that would help make things operate, rules and even punishments if need be. So generally speaking, processes are the analogy there. And the technology, King Arthur won the day with his sword Excalibur, and that was his key technology. And why ultimately they wanted to achieve finding the Holy Grail. And in this case, the Holy Grail is DevOps itself. It's an ongoing quest. The highest level of DevOps is called continuous improvement, the third way. It's an ongoing quest to try to continuously improve, and that's sort of analogous to the Holy Grail. So I hope you find that analogy kind of fun. I weave it through the tutorials and also in the book, and hopefully that makes it just a little bit more interesting. What's the agenda for this tutorial? What is engineering DevOps? Why is engineering DevOps important? How does engineering DevOps work? And what do you need to do to achieve engineering DevOps? There's a white paper on my website that has the same content in textual format. So you're welcome to go there. There's a link at the end of this presentation. You can get a free copy of that. So what is engineering DevOps? Okay, so I wrote the book. I get to write the definition. I mean, the truth is that DevOps, despite being a word that's been around for more than 10 years now, there's no standard definition. So I can't claim that there is, that I can declare there's one now. But for engineering DevOps itself, I like to say that engineering DevOps is the application of lean engineering practices applied to the three ways of DevOps, which are continuous flow, continuous feedback, and continuous improvement. So that's what it is at a very high level. What do you apply it to? Well, you apply it to what I call the 9 pillars of engineering DevOps, which are things that every good DevOps implementation has in one form or another. So leadership practices, collaborative culture practices, designing for DevOps practices, making sure your apps are designed in a way that are optimized or at least compatible with DevOps, continuous integration practices, continuous testing practices, elastic infrastructures, continuous monitoring, continuous security, and finally continuous delivery, which can sometimes extend into continuous deployments for some types of applications, but not always. Those 9 pillars will be described in much more detail in a subsequent tutorial, but that's a reference in this definition. Each one of those pillars has 3 dimensions, so people, aspects, process, and technology. And why are we doing all this? We're doing it because we have expected business outcomes. The benefits are agility, stability, efficiency, quality, security, availability, and satisfaction, not only for the DevOps implementation itself, but obviously the ultimate goal is to have those things for the applications that's being delivered. So that's my definition. I hope you find it useful. I know it's a little bit long-winded, but DevOps is not simple. It deserves a pretty solid coverage in terms of definition. And you can see that it's, if you look at all the dimensions of that definition, it's pretty comprehensive and all-inclusive, and it's also something I think will stand the test of time compared to some of the definitions I've seen. Okay, so why is all that important? Other than the business outcomes that I mentioned, there's a lot of confusion. What is DevOps? As I said before, how should it be implemented? I would say that it should be framed as an engineering problem with an engineering solution. I've seen plenty of books that talk about DevOps as something that's somewhat experimental, iterative, and all of that, which to some extent is true, but really DevOps is the value stream, the assembly line, if you like, for helping to create software. Software itself is more of an art, but the implementation of construction of the software and the building of the artifacts for deployment and deploying it is really more of an engineering problem, in my opinion. So I like to think of it as in engineering context. I guess it's the engineer in me that drives me to say that also, but I think there's some logic in it. And a complete engineering solution does require some things, right? It requires a high-level blueprint, a blueprint that is like a big picture. It covers all the people and process and technology things, all the way from one end to the other of the pipelines and the value streams, from conception through to operations. It's not just a CI/CD pipeline. Again, I hear so many people say, yeah, DevOps is a CI/CD pipeline. It's more than that. It has layers, and it covers not only software creation and merging through delivery, but all the way from planning to operations also, in my opinion. At least that's how I frame it in the context of engineering DevOps. So the big picture, I like to talk in terms of blueprints. I think having a big picture diagram helps people understand, and you can refer to it in a group and just help use it to direct activities and projects even. So this is my big picture blueprint for engineering DevOps. The blueprint illustrates the major components associated with DevOps and the relationships between them in a manner that's consistent with recommended engineering practices. If you look at the diagram, it's really two major layers. The top layer has people, processes, and technology management aspects, and the lower levels is more about applications, pipelines, and infrastructures. Those are the things that are being managed. So at the management layer, you have things like governance and continuous security and site reliability and even disaster recovery. To do that, there's a tools layer called value stream management, which can be an actual software tool or it can be a set of practices in some environments, but generally speaking, it has to do with end-to-end analytics and orchestrating the whole set of activities from one end to the other. Under that, and it can be part of the value stream management or a separate set of tools again, but application release automation or application release orchestration is more specific to the CI/CD pipeline. Being able to model the pipeline, every organization may have a different kind of model depending on what their application needs are. The gate controls between stages in the pipeline and analytics and dashboards for that, specific to the pipeline. So that's the management layer. What's being managed is all the stuff below, the applications, pipelines, and infrastructure. So the pipeline itself has the CI/CD components. So in other words, grooming the backlog, designing the software, coding it, testing it, committing it, merging it, building a merged product and testing that up to some extent, producing artifacts that are delivery candidates, and then the CD series, which is acceptance testing typically, system level, user level, maybe performance level, and application release approvals, and deploying to production and preparing to deploy, and finally post-deployment testing as well, because some things not only shift left, but some things shift right with DevOps when things speed up really quickly. You may have some dark line strategies going on there. We can talk about that again later in different tutorials. Altogether, that layer from planning through to operations is part of what is needing to be managed. And of course, the infrastructure, every stage along that middle layer needs actual computing and storage capability to work. So that's the elastic infrastructure that is served up as a service or as code in a best practices environment. It's ephemeral. It comes and goes as needed, depending on what the workloads requirements are for a particular application, a particular change going through the pipeline. It can be data center capabilities. So again, storage, networks, computing resources, or it could be shared cloud services in the form of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, or even functions as a service. All of together, that big picture diagram is, I find, very handy and useful when I'm talking about what is DevOps and helping people communicate ideas regarding DevOps and where to make improvements. Okay, when I say practices, what am I referring to? Practices are things that provide guidance. They can be documents and templates and blueprints. In general, they're guidance regarding behaviors and actions and choices regarding people, processes, and technology, in this case, for DevOps. So the engineering practices in engineering DevOps are broken down in 3 layers. There's the control and observation layers that I mentioned in the blueprint. So in other words, again, the governance, continuous security, site reliability, value stream management, disaster recovery, and application release automation orchestration, as well as overall pipeline management. At the pipeline layer, there's a series of stages from left to right, as we showed, continuous integration and continuous deployment and delivery. And each of those are further broken down into subsets of stages. And finally, there's the elastic infrastructure layer, which includes things like the shared resources in the data center and cloud components. So those are areas of practices. I have not enough time in this short tutorial to go into detail on the practices for each of those topics, but that's exactly what the remaining tutorials will cover. So stay tuned for subsequent tutorials, or if you're interested in any one particular one, then pick up on the one you're interested in to see the best practices, engineering practices for those. Okay, so what do you need to do to engineer DevOps? If you know the practices, you have a blueprint, you know what it is, what do you actually do, right? So first of all, you need to recognize that you've got to deal with culture. And that's not easy, especially engineers tend to like to work with things rather than people. I get that. I am an engineer, but culture is the door to engineering DevOps. You've got to get leaderships and teams aligned and agreeing on what their goals are. If they don't accept it, there isn't any tool or process that's going to help you be successful. That's got to be addressed. It's got to be addressed up front. Working the team is critical, and that's something the DevOps Institute is, and their Skills Up concepts are very, very useful to address, and all the different training programs they have. But without any underlying engineering basis, culture isn't enough either, right? So you can't only address culture. You also have to deal with all of the underlying technologies. Just as an example, one that I happen to focus on a lot because I think it's really the primary key. I say testing is the primary key to engineering DevOps. Why do I say that? Because only testing provides enough tangible information to measure the quality and completeness of the different artifacts that are going through the pipeline with enough precision so that you can make judgments as to whether or not they should continue to go through the pipeline or you revert it or something. So those two things go hand in hand. Clearly, there's a lot of practices associated with those things, and we won't cover it in this tutorial, but I think that's worth pointing out. That's something you need to do. You need to address culture. You need to address testing. I've actually heard clients say, well, we're not good at testing. Can we do DevOps without testing, without automating testing, without dealing with continuous testing? The answer really is no, with at least not very well, unless you address these things. Okay. How do you do that? It seems like a daunting task. There's a lot of pillars and dimensions. If you cross product pillars and dimensions, you got 27 things, 9 pillars and 3 dimensions. So there's a lot of stuff, right, to kind of get right. So it's helpful to learn from success stories that have gone before you. And to help you with that, there are guidelines, tools, and templates on my website to help implementers get on track and stay on track with your DevOps transformation journey. It is a journey. You're not going to get there in one step. It's not unusual for a DevOps project to take a year to get fully off the ground, and then maybe multiple years to get to the highest performance level that you hope to accomplish. It is an ongoing journey. Continuous improvement is the third way, and the whole point is there's opportunities at any point in time to always make some improvements. So what are these guidelines and tools I'm talking about? I have something called the 7-step DevOps transformation blueprint. It'll be covered in a separate tutorial, but the idea is that it helps leadership get aligned with their goals and the teams and build an assessment a value stream, and a roadmap, as well as implementation plans. So there are checklists to help guide the decision making. There's a tool that's based on the capability maturity model to help you do an assessment to find your current state of maturity relative to your own interests. There are team collaboration tools, including guidelines, communication formats, ways of doing PowerPoints and communicating. There's a value stream map guideline and templates to help you value stream map your current process for an application, current state as well as future state. There's an implementation roadmap template, how to describe and document your improvement roadmap for your DevOps journey. And finally, there are templates for putting together agile epics, stories, and tasks to help you guide implementation for your particular DevOps project. They're all available on the website. Okay, so this is getting close to the end of the talk, this tutorial. We set out to answer the question, what are the key ingredients to assure success with DevOps? So the simple answer is engineering DevOps. It provides guidance, templates, blueprints, recommended engineering practices to assure successful DevOps implementation. If you do all of that, you will accomplish the holy grail of DevOps, I promise you. If you want to learn more, contact myself. You can email me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com, or on my LinkedIn page, network with me, or go on to engineeringdevops.com. This tutorial is available in a white paper format on that website under documents. And you can also get a copy of the book under mybook.to.engineeringdevops. Thank you very much for paying attention throughout this short tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you on the future ones. Thank you.
Mark's got a great series on engineering DevOps. Of course, he's got a wonderful book that he's created as well. One of the things that we offer at Accelerated Strategies is a free 30-minute inquiry. This can be both with product companies and also IT organizations, development teams, etc., people implementing DevOps. You can find out information about this on our website at accelst.com. If you'd like to talk with Mark in particular, and I know he would really enjoy conversations with folks interested in engineering DevOps, you can visit his Calendly link at calendly.com/engineeringdevops/DevOps chat. I hope you take advantage of both.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of MediaOps here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. The tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at MediaOps for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.
Elsa, you're all over the place.
How am I supposed to do anything when she's over here just doing her own thing?
Okay, well, maybe if Dan played more than just one string, we'd all be more on the same page.
Are you out of your mind? Okay, I do the E string. That's my job.
Isn't there an easier way to do this? There has to be.
I literally just suggested something. Nobody ever listens to me, though,
It's
so.
ridiculous every time.
When your team's not on the same page, things can get weird, fast. Don't make your DevOps team live like this.
El tutto tu tempo es finito, Dan.
See? It's like we're not speaking the same language. I'm out.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, making sure your teams are all on the same page.
Do you know how to play the E string?
I can learn.
Okay, everyone. that's going to wrap up our show for Wednesday, May 13th. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back tomorrow with a fresh lineup of some great information. We have the Gigamon Security podcast going to be on tomorrow as well, video podcast. Good stuff. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. We'll see you tomorrow. Alan Schimmel, TechStrong.